Hi, this is Rebecca.
And this is Brandon.
And welcome to the Drive Home Review podcast.
We are a couple of theater nerds who love movies and love talking about movies.
And inevitably disagreeing on movies.
So join us for our Drive Home Reviews podcast. We're trying to go scriptless. How we doing?
So far, 0 for 2. So since we are talking about Rocky, which has morphed into Creed over the course of the years, let's talk representation in film. So you're Italiano.
Italian, Irish, Polish, but yeah, mostly Italian.
You present very Italian.
Yes.
So was seeing a guy like Rocky, did that mean anything to you growing up?
See, I won't necessarily say so because I didn't really get into the Rocky films until I was much older. Like,
really?
I didn't get really into the Rocky movies until like college. I think I'd seen them sporadically, but I seem to remember. I think I did a Rocky movie marathon at one time in high school back in the Blockbuster video days when you would go and I'd rent one and then rent others and so on and so forth. But I really didn't become a huge fan until much later on. So I can't say that growing up it ever did, but I know that during the pandemic, when we couldn't do real movie reviews, that's when I would do Forgotten Gems and The Series. And one of the series I looked at was the Rocky franchise. I remember that was one of the first things we watched as a couple.
Yeah, we watched all the way straight through, starting with Rocky.
The original, going all the way up to Creed 2 at the time.
Right.
But I think as an Italian, and having watched it, kind of rewatching the series with that critical eye, I think Rocky is probably one of the best representations of Italian Americans.
And your family's from New Jersey, but not far from Philly.
No, so they are that kind of breed of East Coast Italian.
Right.
You know, and just I think what really struck me about Rocky, especially like I said, especially rewatching it, is how just anti-toxic masculinity.
Oh yeah, big time.
The character is, and that's before toxic masculinity was a thing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it existed,
but there wasn't a term for it.
We weren't recognizing
it, and it wasn't seen as a bad thing.
Right.
You know, at the time the Rocky movies were coming up, late 70s and into the 80s, toxic masculinity was seen as a positive.
Right.
And yet you watch those series of films and just how anti all of that, anything that you could relate as a toxic relationship or a toxic person, Rocky just is not. He's not racist. He's not bigoted. He never raises a hand to his wife.
No, he treats Adrian as a full partner.
He is deeply in love with his wife. He's deeply dedicated to his family, even though it's shown that he makes mistakes.
Right.
You know, he tries to learn from them. He tries to do the right thing. And just, that's kind of the thing that really struck me, because especially when you think of Italian Americans.
Yeah, you're very sensitive to the Italian American trope in movies.
Yeah, I am. I'm very sensitive to the.
Don't even get him started on Joey Tribbiani from Friends.
God, dude! Oh my God, I hate that guy so freaking much.
Anyways, but the fact that there was such good representation there, I really think speaks to how Ryan Coogler saw the movies growing up.
Yeah.
And connected with them so well, and then went on to write Creed and produce these movies.
Yeah. Well, even like we were talking about, like even the representation of black performers and actors and black people in culture, yes, told through obviously a white person's lens, but still very, I'm not going to say sympathetic, but it never felt like he talked down to them. All the black characters in his movies were always very powerful, very sure of themselves. You know,
I
Apollo
mean,
Creed.
Apollo Creed was, even though he was technically the bad guy in the first two movies, he was never a bad guy,
Yeah,
you
but
know?
that's the thing is, I don't think Apollo Creed. I don't think you could classify him as the bad guy. He was the obstacle. He was the opponent. I guess if you're going classic terminology, the antagonist. But he was never the bad guy. He never hated Rocky. He never was out to hurt him. He was never. He was
Right.
out to make money. You know.
So, so you're saying like it's Rocky was historically good with representation.
I really feel so.
And I think even with the Creed movies, well, Creed especially, there's representation there in multiple ways, but disability representation too,
Oh
which we'll
yeah,
talk more about when we get
yeah.
into the review. Um, I yes, I tend to think that real women tend to be underrepresented in movies, um, of any ilk, but especially poor women or women of color, are underrepresented. And then, of course, you have controversies like the Little Mermaid,
Oh God.
when all of creation is up in arms about having a black mermaid, because this imaginary creature should obviously be
Be
white.
white. Yeah. I mean,
Right. Like, yeah, it's, but then you see these TikTok videos of these little girls watching
mhm.
Black Ariel, and you're like, like, that's
Well, and I
that's
feel
something.
yeah, and I feel safe in saying that I think the Rocky franchise, which now includes the three Creed pictures, have been good with representation because there was some guy on TikTok, and I didn't see the whole video, and he was basically saying that he was too black for Rocky,
Hmm.
and was basically saying that the Rocky franchise was racist, and a lot of black creators called him out on it
Right.
and we're saying no, these were like some of the least racist
From the
films.
70s and
Yeah, and
early
again,
80s.
especially considering the time period in which they were made. So, you know, I don't think Sylvester Stallone. Maybe now he does, but I don't think Sylvester Stallone gets the credit that he deserves for just what a complex and important character Rocky Balboa
I mean,
really is.
truly, like, even the movies that you could write off as being cheesy or bad, like Rocky 5, I think we watched it. You watched it for the first time
Yeah,
with me, right?
I'd never seen Rocky 5, and most
Right.
people haven't or forget that they have.
And the first time we watched it, like, we talked about that movie for hours, legitimately
Yeah.
talked about it for hours afterwards, because not that it was great, but because of it did have a significant place in the Rocky canon. So now I will say that my ethnic background does get a lot of bad representation in media. I'm Romani, um, on my mom's side, which, if you use the slur terminology, it would be what people refer to as gypsies, but that is really a slur. But that is definitely, I mean, I am hard pressed to find very good representation of Roma people in movies.
Now, here's an interesting question that you bring that up, and we were just talking about The Little Mermaid.
Right.
Um, they just released the cast list for the live action version of Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Gal Gadot is going to be playing Esmeralda.
I am not a fan, first of all, because I don't like Gal Gadot,
She,
personally.
she's a lovely woman, but a charisma vacuum.
But there are Roma performers. Why aren't we
Yeah,
using a Roma performer?
that's kind of what I was thinking.
Um, so, and I'm interested to see how they represent Esmeralda, because that's it. Of any representation of Roma, I think that's probably got to be the least problematic because it is showcasing that she is being persecuted. She's not skanky. The Roma people are actually very conservative and very I won't say prudish, but like very cautious about their bodies and about sexuality. So um the portrayal that we often get is steal your chickens, curse your children, kidnap your babies,
There,
or steal things from
there was
people.
this. I did it. One of the last films I did a review of last year. This romantic comedy. I think it was called Dance with Me or something. And there was literally like an old gypsy woman, like
Mhm.
you'd expect to see in a 1930s horror movie.
Right.
That you have expected to tell Lawrence Talbot not to go out in the full moon. And it's like I'm like, are you serious? In 2022 at the time, we're
I
we're still
know.
doing this? Holy crap!
But they are what's still one of the most discriminated against ethnicities in the world. And um, they're like literally signs all over Europe of that, no,
Yeah.
no G slur here. So yeah, I'm trying to think of good representations. Like they're really, I would say maybe Jenny Calendar from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay.
Um, because she is represented as a modern woman. She's represented as someone who still treasures her background, but um, is not sleeping in a wagon and stealing your children.
Yeah.
Um, as much as I love Criminal Minds, there's this terrible episode where this traveler family kidnaps a girl and is trying to teach their son how to like pickpocket. Like there's just so many things like that. Thinner, the movie Thinner, that whole premise is problematic.
There was an episode of House
Hmm.
where he treated a Romani kid.
Yeah, is that the one where he swallows a toothpick?
Yeah, he swallowed a toothpick is what happened.
Yeah. And there was actually, there's been a couple of episodes in Law and Order SVU where where they take place in the Roma community in New York,
Yeah.
which are a lot more, a lot less problematic, is what I'll say. So, yeah, I would love to see some good representation of what the actual struggles of the Roma people were. Like tracing back my ancestry was interesting because we came over from persecution in Europe and basically had to hide our culture to fit into the auto industry in factories in the 1930s in eastern United States, and then faced more persecution for being dark skinned and poor. So yeah, I'd love to see a story like that. I might
Yeah.
just have to write it.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
Okay.
diversity and representation. Let's talk about it as we go into reviewing our movie.
Okay. Before we do that, just for fun,
Okay, okay, okay.
I've pulled this up. So because we're big Rocky fans,
We are, both of us.
So we're gonna see. I pulled this up online, and this is supposedly the ultimate Rocky movie quiz. I don't know if we'll have time to do all of them, but let's see how many we can get.
Okay.
All right. So question number 1, insultingly easy. Who had a cameo as Thunder Lips the wrestler?
Oh my
Rocky
gosh.
fights in a charity match.
Hulk Hogan, and the last good thing he ever did.
Yeah, that was I think Hulk
Rocky
Hogan's
3.
first movie.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it only went downhill from there.
Yeah.
I love Thunder in Paradise. No. Where does Adrian, Rocky's love interest, work?
Oh, at the pet store.
Oh my god! Like how?
Those are so easy.
These are so easy.
That's how he.
Okay, I'm not even going to look at the in Rocky 4. Who does Ivan Drago fight before Rocky?
Apollo Creed.
Yeah. Oh my god! This is the ultimate Rocky quiz.
It's the easiest Rocky
Yeah.
quiz.
What? Okay.
The young fighter. Oh, do you know this one?
What is the name of the young fighter that
The-
Rocky trains in the fifth film? It's Tommy the Machine Gun.
yes.
And my phone just told me it has to update, so we're spared the rest of these awful. We should have looked at these before we started because we were quizzing each other before we watched the movie.
Right.
You know, so what were some
Our
of the
questions were way harder.
well, yeah, what were some of the ones that we had? Like,
What does Adrian wear at the end of the Rocky movie, the first one?
and what was the answer?
I believe that one was the red beret, and
Mhm.
then Rocky 2 was a white beret.
Okay, and I one of the ones I gave to you was list all of the major antagonists in chronological order.
That one's tough.
Yeah.
So Apollo Creed, Clubber Lang, Ivan Drago, Tommy Gunn, and I always forget who he fights in Rocky Balboa.
Mason the Line Dixon.
Oh, that is a terrible boxer name.
It was one of those really obvious ones. I'm like, really, Mason Dixon? Really?
Yeah.
But we can't diss the movie Rocky Balboa
No.
because it has that great speech.
Um,
Oh my god! And if you've never, I love watching reaction videos on YouTube and watching like men watch that movie for the first time and they're crying when he gives that speech. It's just like.
Plus, it establishes Milo Ventimiglia
Yeah,
as his son,
which is great casting.
It really was.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he looks more like his son than Sage Stallone did
Yeah.
in Rocky 5.
Yeah, it did.
So, anyways,
Anywho, all right. So yeah, so that was a pretty pathetic Rocky quiz.
that was terrible.
I gotta say, oh, you had a good one about what was the name? What was the real name of his dog?
Right. I'm afraid I was wrong on that. Like, I don't know if I was right or not. Let me look it up.
Well,
ask the question.
Well, I mean that was the question. So we will bring you the answer when we return here in a second. So stay tuned for that and our review of Creed 3.
I know you will all be relieved and thrilled to hear that I was right about the name of the dog. So it was actually Rocky's Bull Mastiff, which is my favorite breed of dog. And the dog was named in the movie was
Butkus.
Butkus, and that was her real name in real life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was right.
Yay!
Okay, let's talk Creed 3.
So I have been looking forward to this one.
Yes.
I've been biding my time and waiting because God, I love the Rocky franchise and the Creed franchise.
And it is well documented on this podcast and the YouTube channel before it, your stellar love for Michael B. Jordan.
You know what? And I have no shame in that.
Oh no.
I have absolutely no shame in that.
Good for you, honey. I totally encourage it.
I said it after the first Creed movie. I said it after Just Mercy. I've said it after Black Panther. I have said it after all of them. That if you are not on board the Michael B. Jordan train, then you are being left in the dust. This man is freaking just.
He's very good looking and charming, but also insanely talented.
But he is so talented.
Very talented.
And from all accounts and everything you see, he's the nicest freaking guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I have not seen him give a bad performance.
Right.
I mean, I've not seen him in a bad movie. Right. And this especially goes, and even though he did not direct this one, Michael B. Jordan did, but I also firmly want to restate my allegiance to Ryan Coogler.
Yeah, I've enjoyed every Ryan Coogler movie I've seen. Now, did you ever see Fruitvale Station?
I did not.
We need to go back and watch that.
But I remember after seeing Creed, the first one, going, these two young men are going to freaking rule Hollywood.
Right.
And here we are, not that long removed from when that happened. And Michael B. Jordan is one of the most, he's an A-lister.
Yeah.
And Ryan Coogler has directed two of the most successful films in one of the most successful franchises in history. Ryan Coogler could you could make the argument he made one of the most important films of this decade
Okay,
in
yeah.
Black Panther and then
Hmm.
the sequel. So I mean, these guys are going to rule Hollywood whether you like it or not. So you better just
Speaking of
get
ruling home, get on the train.
get
Yes.
on the train.
Speaking of ruling, Michael B. Jordan directed this one.
Yes, he did. This is his directorial debut.
So we will kind of be looking at not only his performance, but his direction as well. So, and then another guy we have seen recently, Jonathan Majors, is here. I half expected him to kind of, Kang the Conqueror out a little bit in parts of it.
Well, let me get the synopsis. So the synopsis is Killmonger fights Kang the Conqueror while Valkyrie looks on. So that's not it. Anyway, continue on.
And Mrs. Huxtable is there.
And Mrs. Huxtable is there.
But okay. So the real synopsis.
So as we pick up, it's however many years since Creed 2. Adonis has retired. He retired on top. He was like the unified champ, had 3 belts.
He's promoting and coaching, I guess.
Yeah, running the gym and I say
Right.
coaching the current world champion.
Felix.
When an old buddy of his, played by Jonathan Majors, comes back into his life. This is a person he used to know as a young man.
In the group home
where
he was before Mrs. Marianne Creed.
Yeah.
Marianne or Mary Lynn?
Marianne.
Came and took him into her home. So in the last 18 years, Damien.
Damien is played by Jonathan Majors, has been in prison.
He's been in prison the last 18 years, and he wants to come back and get a shot.
Yeah, he wants to come out and reclaim his dream of being the world champion, feeling that Adonis kind of not just owes him, but that he got to live the life that Jonathan Majors always wanted. And this film is, I think of all the Creed movies, this is the one you could really say is really Creed's story. Rocky is not a part of this. He doesn't.
Right, he's not even in it at all.
No cameo. Sylvester Stallone did produce it.
Right.
But so there's no hangover from the previous movies.
Right.
There's no loose ends.
Yeah, there's because the first one. Is it the first one he fights Drago?
No, it's the first one is just him trying to reclaim his name and make a name for himself. And
the second one he's fighting.
Then he fights
Drago Jr.
Drago Jr.
And then now it's totally his own story.
Yeah. So and it's dealing with his past, his life,
right,
and his legacy, and not necessarily his father's legacy.
What did you think of the storyline?
I thought the storyline was pretty good, honestly. I think, and I'll probably restate this towards the end of the review, is that after I saw the second Creed, one of the first things I thought was, just stop. The story is done. It was great. I don't know where else to go with it. And
you said that after the first Creed.
I said that after the first Creed. Yes, I did. And I think if they had to come back and do a third one, that taking it back to and making it Adonis's story and him having to deal with his past and not necessarily his father's past was the right way to go. You got to kind of see that it's kind of a cliche story a little bit, but as we kind of talked about with the Champions review, a cliche story is not a bad thing if you tell it in an interesting way with interesting characters.
I think that they did do some twists on that cliche that kind of made it work. One of the subplots, I don't even know if you would call it a subplot, one of the other things going on is that Tessa Thompson, as his wife, she's going deaf and not performing musically anymore, but producing for other people. And their daughter, Amari, I think, is completely deaf and going to deaf school and having issues with wanting to fight people. and he kind of seeing his kid through new eyes and wanting her to be able to stand up for herself, but also coming to terms with the fact like you might have, this residual anger or even, hereditary like trauma that has passed down in the DNA, that his daughter's having to deal with, and
Well, it
how to help kind of cope through that.
kind of going back to what we were talking about in the introduction about toxic masculinity,
Hmm.
is that the thrust of this film, aside from Adonis,
Thrust.
uh, aside from Adonis trying to face his past and reconcile with the mistakes he made as a young man, um, in terms of his interpersonal relationships, it's about him learning to open up. He's retired from boxing, so he doesn't have that outlet for his anger. And this is a through line, because this was part of the plot of the first Creed, is that he had all this anger, and he was learning to channel it. But
Right.
now that he doesn't have that, he has to learn to open up, and he's having a very hard time doing that.
And reconciling his childhood,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I do like seeing in movies, because it is so real to life, is when you have kids, and especially if you have had trauma in your childhood, when your kid hits that age where you had your own significant trauma, then it becomes so much more visceral and you almost have to deal with it over again. And I had trauma when I was a kid from the ages of like 4 to 6. And every one of my daughters, when they hit that age, I kind of went back through it and um had to do healing again from that trauma. And so that's, that age where he's at is when, or his daughter is at the age he was when he went into that group home. And seeing your kid at that age and thinking, holy crap, that is who I was. And if something like that ever happens to my child, what would I do? Like, that's a whole thing. Like, that is a whole that is a whole mood.
Yeah.
you know? Um, I loved, speaking of, we talked about representation in movies.
Hmm.
And one of my favorite things in this movie was the representation of adaptive technology and resources that they use, and don't even like call it out really much or anything, to just like,
It's just there.
right,
It's just part of their life. As their daughter's death, things like the
signing,
signing, that's the major thing. But like their doorbell, when someone rings their doorbell, lights
flash.
go on and off.
Hmm.
They have a glass floor
On the second floor.
so that they can look up and
Sign.
sign to her, and she can look down and see them signing. Um, One of the times at the very end when
They're celebrating,
they're
yeah.
dancing and celebrating. They have the music hooked up to kind of a color strobe light so
Hmm.
that she can quote unquote hear the music.
Right.
And again, none of this is ever called out or on a soapbox. It's just this is what we did.
Yeah, and I don't know that if you weren't someone who is part of the disability community, I don't know that you would so much notice it, as much as be like, oh cool, their floor is glass,
Yeah.
but seeing adaptive things just kind of incorporated in was, I think, really
Well, and
awesome.
I think that's a good segue into, and this is something again we talked about with the Champions um, review, and let's talk about the young actor who plays
Right.
his daughter,
Right.
who actually is deaf.
She is Mila Davis Kent. Mila Davis Kent, is a deaf girl. Um, and her Instagram, it like has the little subtitle "Black Deaf Girl Magic," and it's awesome. And
She was phenomenal. She was
she was
so
great.
good
She was
in
great.
this movie. Like, amazing performance.
Yes, and like you don't miss anything by her being deaf. Like,
No,
it's not any less powerful because she's deaf.
the only thing, now here's something, this didn't take away from the movie, but it was something I kept thinking about watching it. It's like, so you're a boxer. So your job is to punch people. What happens if you break your hand and you're unable to sign with it?
Oh, that would suck.
And
Yeah.
therefore a major aspect of your communication with your child is cut off.
Right.
And that's not something. I don't feel like the movie lacked anything by not having that touched upon, but it was something I was always concerned about, or something that because his daughter wants to fight, like you said, she has the Creed blood. um
Yeah, she's very good.
but nobody kind of ever makes the point to her, is like, what happens if you break your hand?
Right.
What happened? That's gonna severely limit your communication abilities. I don't know, maybe it was something they could have touched on, maybe not, I don't know. It's just something
I honestly think that in 10 years we're gonna get an Amari Creed movie.
it would not surprise me. Let's hold on to that. So great performance there. Great performances all around. I don't think we really have to
No.
go into great detail. You look at this cast.
I did enjoy that there is a significant difference. I think that Jonathan Majors has kind of an overall oeuvre, but I feel like Diamond Dame is a lot different than King the Conqueror.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like, you could really, there was a significant difference, and you really get over that King the Conqueror thing in the first couple minutes.
Yeah, well, this is one of those films. It's really amazing, especially with this one and Ant-Man coming out so close
I
together,
know.
and holding those two performances up, and
Mhm.
going, man, this guy's got a range, and this
Yeah.
guy can do a lot.
I
And
wonder if he's going to get pigeonholed into being a jerk, though.
I don't know, but here's the
I
thing: he
almost think he
plays
needs to do like a romantic comedy next.
maybe, yeah. But I don't fear that so much for him, because again, the differences in the Kang villain and this villain are so vast.
Yeah, it does show a lot of range.
I don't think he's going to have that problem, or I hope not.
Tessa Thompson
I
doing her
mean,
beautiful thing.
come on, Tessa Thompson's amazing.
She really is.
And again, you'll hold this performance up to
Valkyrie,
and they're like, it's like night and day. Like
Mhm.
you'd be forgiven for not thinking they're the same person.
That, yeah, I would say.
You know.
Felicia Rashad was
Yeah, and
excellent.
it's Felicia Rashad.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, and what
Plus, like, you got to see like a lot of your favorites come back from the other. I think that he really incorporated a lot of the boxers from his earlier movies.
Yep, but yeah, a lot of returning characters.
Mhm.
I love that he brought Drago back.
Right.
As both, and you kind of get to see, and I want to talk about this scene here in a minute. But I like that he brought Drago back, and like, obviously whatever bad blood they had, they smoothed over. They're
Mhm.
working together. They see each other. Like, Drago is his sparring partner when he's training.
Yep.
So I love that. So this is kind of apropos of nothing. So non sequitur just into this, but this is something I noticed. One of the things I loved about this movie, and I love about the Creed franchise, is it has complete three-dimensional characters.
Right.
There is, and I think, as much as I love the Rocky movies, especially when you get into kind of the middle of them, the Clubber Langs, the Ivan Dragos, these are cartoon characters.
Right.
They are there to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
You can't really call them three-dimensional characters. Ivan Drago became a three-dimensional character retroactively because of Creed 2. But for just Rocky 4, no, he's just the bad guy.
Robotic bad guy.
Yeah.
Almost.
But the Creed films, and I think you can attribute this to Ryan Coogler's influence, is that all of the characters are very three-dimensional. And what makes me say that is the scene at the very end. There's a scene that was cut from Creed 2. And I'm very mad it was cut, because I think it's an important scene and they should have left it in. And it's after the final fight. Adonis goes into the locker room and he sits down next to Drago Jr. And he says to him, "You're more than just this fight."
Right.
And it was such a beautiful scene and illustrates the difference between the generations.
Right.
Because the 80s, you beat the bad guy and that's it. The bad guy's vanquished. But in the modern era, you beat this person and these men are more interested in not repeating the mistakes of the past.
Right.
And he goes and basically tells him, don't make the same mistake your father did and make your whole life about this one night. And I was mad that scene was cut. And I have a feeling Michael B. Jordan was mad that scene was cut because they have an almost identical scene at the end of this one where he goes to Jonathan Majors and they have a discussion and kind of reconcile.
Right.
You know, that even after everything Jonathan Majors did,
right,
he still, Creed still says, I'm sorry for what I did as a kid. I'm not blameless.
Right.
And
Jonathan Majors does kind of come around and say, that wasn't really on you and it never really was.
Yeah.
So speaking of that and Michael B. Jordan keeping things in, what did you think about the directorial style?
I think Michael B. Jordan has a great career as a director. I think there's some great directing going on, and there's just some really good shots. There's some really good compositions. I think, though, and we talked about this.
Right, the last fight scene.
The last fight scene, I feel, and this happens with a lot of young directors, I think it was a little over-directed.
I think it started off really strong, and then it kind of went too much.
Yeah.
And then, it pulled back and it was better. But there was a couple of special effects that really were not necessary.
Yeah. So what he does is, during the final fight, and of course the final fight is this big hoopla in the middle of Dodger Stadium and thousands of people. But because it's a fight between these two men,
right?
During the fight,
everything whites out.
Yeah, the audience kind of fades out, and it's just the two of them focusing on beating the crap out of each other.
So it's silent, and it's just the two of them in the ring, and that was great. But then he has this imagery of the jail cells and and kind of these fast shots that just weren't necessary.
Yeah, and it ran the risk of making it comical. Yeah. Like when the jail cell sprung, I'm like, steel cage match.
I know, yeah.
It was like, it didn't need that.
So one of the things that I really enjoyed with this is that they took the classic Rocky tropes and kind of did their own spin on them. You've got this scene where Diamond Dame is working out in front of the crowds, much like Apollo Creed did in Rocky 2, and Rocky did with Clubber Lang in Rocky 3, and then you've got a very Rocky 4 training sequence for Creed, for Adonis.
Yeah.
Where he's in a barn somewhere and he's pulling a plane and I said he's gonna need a mountain for this training sequence.
And then 2 seconds later,
there he is running up a mountain in the training sequence. I called it, but it was enjoyable.
Yeah, no,
totally enjoyable.
It was that just right amount of hokey.
Yes,
because that's part of what makes
you need to have a training sequence. You've got to have a training sequence.
You need that because that is what gets anybody I don't care who you are. You watch a Rocky training sequence, you're like, I'm gonna go freaking.
Yeah, I gotta go lift some weights.
Yeah, ha da da da.
I gotta go run up some steps.
Well, even things like the music at the very end, when spoiler alert, when Creed wins and they play the music from the end of Rocky where he won the fight.
Right.
Da 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 da.
Yep. It is very much, but they, like I said, they take the Rocky trope and they turn it on its own. When in Rocky 2, Rocky decides he's got to fight Apollo Creed again. Adrian is against it. She's she can't understand why he's going to do this. He's going to get hurt. Why do you want to do this? You have a good job. And in this movie, when Adonis is saying to Bianca that, I'm going to have to fight him. There's only one way to stop him. And she's just fully behind him.
Yeah.
like jumps on board right away. Like just is totally a full partner with it. So like you see these similarities to the movies before, but this movie really makes it their own.
Here's an interesting thing. This is one of the things that it didn't ruin my enjoyment of the film, but it is something that I thought of is that when Creed decides I've got to go fight this guy, I wasn't really sure why. I mean, yes, Dame like lied and cheated and sabotaged things to trick Adonis into giving him the title match.
Right.
But
Well,
after,
and cheated in the title
yeah,
match.
yeah, and cheated in the title. But then he's like, "I'm going to come for everything you've got." We never see that. Like, you don't see him like actively
Yeah,
trying to take over the gym. No, all you hear is that he's trash talking him. It's like,
well, and saying, really like bad mouthing him and going after him.
yeah, but come on, you could.
I feel like if they would have added all that stuff in, it would have made the movie too long, and you would have complained about that.
Probably. I'm just saying that it's like,
Yeah.
I think their justification for why he had to fight him. I think they could have made it a little clearer that it was a personal choice.
I don't know. Well, yeah, obviously it's a personal choice, but I really think that was the only way to defeat him, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really did like the way that you really see the beauty, and that's one of the things that I've always loved about the Rocky movies is, like you said, how much he loved Adrian. And there's no hint of him being attracted to someone else. There's no hint of I'm gonna go to the strip club or sleep around with somebody, or like it's always it always cherishes that relationship.
Yeah, and I would make the argument that I think Bianca is kind of a more well-rounded character than Adrian.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about directing. Let me talk about this. You were out of the theater for this. When Felicia Rashad's character dies, when she has her stroke and she's in bed, and Adonis comes to see her, there is this heartbreaking speech that she gives where she thinks that Adonis is Apollo.
Aww.
And she's touching his face and saying, "He's just like you. He's just like you, Apollo." And the way Michael B. Jordan's face is tilted and the way it's lit, he looks like Carl Weathers.
Oh my gosh!
So there is an example of good directing.
I'm glad I missed that part. I would have been crying for the rest of the movie.
There's one other thing I want to say before, because we're running out of time here and we're gonna have to wrap up. There was one thing I was very happy about because it's something I've been bitching about since the first Creed movie.
Oh, so not Michael B. Jordan taking off his shirt?
No.
What? We were very happy about that.
Okay, let's just say that Michael B. Jordan and
Jonathan Majors.
Holy shit!
Like,
I don't want this to sound bad or not, but Jonathan Majors looked scary.
Like scary jacked. Like
he was
like so many muscles, it looks painful.
Oh my god!
Like, yeah. And you don't see them until he gets in the ring. Like he purposely is always wearing these like sweatshirts and
and like hoodies and
everything up, and not until he gets in the ring and takes off his
robe. Do you see like how
and you're like
freaking
what
like massive he is? So kudos to those guys and what they had to put their bodies through to get in that kind of shape, because it was insane.
Yeah. Okay, and we're back. It's a quick break there.
Yeah, so here's the thing that I was getting to.
Okay, we got sidetracked by Michael B. Jordan shirtless.
Hey, again, no shame. No shame. And that is, and again, this is all they needed was a line, and I'm glad they did this. When Michael B. Jordan is having his fight with Felicia Rashad due to, because of plot circumstances, he says that Dane, Jonathan Majors' character, treated me more like a brother than any of your kids ever did.
Right.
And that's something I've been wondering about since the first Creed film, is that we see in, I think, Rocky 3 or 4, Apollo had other kids,
Right.
and we never hear about them in any of these other Creed films. And I've always been curious. It's like, what was that relationship like?
Right.
Who?
He would have been younger than them.
Yeah,
But yeah,
but they still must have had.
some kind. I mean, they would have had some interaction.
Yeah. So
Especially since he was living with their mother.
yeah,
So.
exactly. So, and I was always very curious, like, what was that? What was that relationship? So it's a small throwaway line, not even a throwaway line, but I'm glad that they at least brought it up because it's something that's been bugging me. I always hate when films do that. Now this is a
When
great
they retcon kids.
or not even retcon, but just they completely ignore an important fact. Now
Right.
this is a great film franchise. Let me compare it to a shitty reboot franchise in the Jurassic World movies. When in the second one, we're like, we've got to get these dinosaurs off this island because it's going to blow up. It's like, wasn't there an entire second island that had dinosaurs on it? And then like, we'll get these dinosaurs off of it, and then we'll have to find some place for them to live. It's like, what about that second damn island?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, at first I'm like, are we just pretending those movies didn't exist? But then they quote those movies. So clearly they did. So I hate when movies do that. You're like, look, this happened. Don't pretend it didn't.
Right.
Anyway.
So back to the Rockyverse.
Back to the Rockyverse.
But yeah, that was a good inclusion, I thought.
Yeah.
Any qualms?
No. Aside from little things like like I say, being over directed, I do feel like this of the three Creed films, I think this was kind of I don't want to say the weakest because it was a good movie, but you can kind of tell that they're getting to the end of the Creed story,
right?
So I really loved it. I thought the acting was great. Thought the characters were fantastic. The direction was pretty good for
first time director.
For a first time director, yeah. And I'll just restate kind of what we said earlier is that I'm going to say it again, and I don't mind being proven wrong in these instances, but I kind of hope that they
just leave it there.
They stop.
Yeah.
Like I said, if 10 years from now we get a
Mara
Creed movie, I'm fine with that. You pass it on to the next generation, like Creed did.
I think that would be really interesting.
It would be
to take the perspective of what it must be like to be a deaf athlete.
Yeah, so I think you could do that. But I really, and again, but the other thing about it, and we've mentioned this too, is that one of the things that the Creed movies have kind of been, aside from this great continuation of the Rocky franchise, is they've been a place where young Black directors
get their start.
Kind of get their start on a major stage. Ryan Coogler, he'd never directed anything that big before, and then he went on to do Black Panther.
Right.
The gentleman who directed the second one, whose name I am blanking on.
I'm looking it up right now. Keep talking.
He's going to be directing, and this isn't, who knows, it might be good, but he's directing the next Transformers movie.
Right.
So he's getting a huge shot at a big franchise.
Stephen Capel Jr.
Yeah. And so I have no doubt that if a new young Black director came to them and said, I have an idea of something I want to do with this franchise and with this character, I don't doubt that Stallone, Coogler, and Jordan would be like, all right, cool, let's do it.
Right.
To get, if for no other reason than to get this kid, in true Rocky fashion, to give the rookie the chance.
The underdog.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would be interesting is if the next iteration is done by a Black woman director.
That would be really interesting.
So yeah, let's hear. We're gonna say 10 years. We're gonna have Amari Creed and Done by a Black woman director.
And I would be there for that.
Yep.
I'd be very there for that. I'd be very excited to see that.
So, all
Because
right.
I do think the Creed movies, if this is the last one for a while, I think they have a great legacy.
They do.
And a legacy that is, and much like Adonis himself, a legacy that continues on from the great films that they spawned from, but added their own voice and
Right.
their own take on. They made it their own,
Right.
which is what a good franchise and a good character and a good world should do.
And you feel like these movies keep going on because they're a story that wants to be told. You know, you have some other franchises like Fast and the Furious that are just movies being made to be made, when you have these, when it's a story that should be told, not just a movie that needs to be made. You know, so
Well,
yeah.
yeah, and without getting too philosophical or deep, but kind of like Rocky was when he came around, they're characters that we kind of need when we need them.
Right.
You know, and people kind of forget that, and why Rocky was so important is that at the time it was made, I mean, that was a down time.
Yeah.
And here comes this scrappy underdog who gets the shit kicked out of him, but still, manages to pull through and, pull himself up out of the dirt. That's what people needed, and I think that's true of Creed. And I don't want to speak for other people, but especially, black audiences, young black men, need that positive hero. And I would say that I think Creed's a great role model.
Yeah.
So I can see people falling in love with these movies and then meaning just as much to an audience now as the Rocky films did back in the day.
It does make our Rocky versus marathons a lot longer.
It does. That's the only downside. You really got to plot. You really got to plot them out.
9 movies now.
Yep. And if they do an Amari Creed one, I would be there for that.
Yeah,
So.
I would agree with you. I think we've got great performances. We got a great story, and I will very likely watch it again and again and again.
Yep, same here. All right, so this is pretty much academic here, but let's wrap it up. So final grade for you, Creed 3.
It's got to be an A+. I did think that the special effects in the last scene were a little over the top, but they kind of redeemed themselves with a really great shot of a double punch. So yeah, I'm gonna go A+.
You know what? I'm gonna go an A+ as well. And kind of the same thing you were saying is that even with the things that I mentioned that are kind of the weaknesses of a young director, I at least respect that he was trying to do something and to add a visual element to the story, to do something that hadn't been done before in this franchise. So, they don't always stick the landing.
Right.
But you have to experiment in order to know that. So I look forward to whatever Michael B. Jordan directs next. I think he has a great career, not just as an actor, but as a director now. So,
yep.
So yeah, this is a great film. I think maybe the first truly great film of the year that I would say.
Yeah, probably. I can't remember what all we've watched this year. And coming up next will either be Scream 6 or some obscure movie we haven't decided on yet.
Yep. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for another beautiful date night.
Thank you,
my love. We do have to get better at the dinner part of it.
Yeah, we keep going to restaurants that are about to close.
Yeah. But anyway, so thank you for that. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time. And as always, drive safe, and we'll see you at the movies.